With American diplomacy on the line, let's bring in two of the reporters who broke this story. Our White House reporter, Jake Traylor, and MS Now senior national security reporter, David Rohde. Also with us, Charlie Sykes, author of To the Contrary on Substack, and MS Now senior congressional reporter and host of Way Too Early, Ali Vitali. Jake, I would ask you why Rubio has been less visible, but I think his body language at the G7 said it all. How much longer can he get away with this?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, look, from the largest dissenter in the White House of ever going to war, turned the face, the leader of negotiations. How does that happen? That's what my colleague David and I dug into here. One White House official I spoke to said, not that it was necessarily Marco Rubio's job, but he was strategically sidestepping ever being offered the job from President Trump because he knew if Trump said you're doing it, he'd have to say yes. He did that because he was very confident this deal would be unsuccessful in the average American's eyes. And I don't want to get too ahead of it, but obviously there's some 2028 calculus going on there. Another White House official that I talked to said that Vance ultimately knew he had to accept this whenever the president presented it to him, but it was a deal that was unlikely to succeed. Vance had to think through this. He has confidence it can, but it's not something that he throughout the time necessarily wanted to have that job in the first place. I will say this is an uphill battle for Vance. He was supposed to be on a book tour last week that kind of turned into defending this unpopular memorandum of understanding that has had bipartisan backlash across the aisle, essentially. And I think a moment that really just illustrates how challenging this is for Vance to be the mouthpiece and the voice for this deal with President Trump doing what he wants in real time. Over the weekend in Switzerland, as Vance talked about a new leaf being turned over, a new relationship going forward between the United States and Iran. Literally minutes later, President Trump posted on Truth Social that he was threatening new strikes against Iran. It just shows how challenging of a moment this is for Vice President Vance, who never wanted this war in the first place and is now leading the charge to end it.
David Rohde, listen, Vance joins a long line of vice presidents who've been put in the awkward position of being asked to handle the most politically perilous of issues. That part is not new. I think the Rubio piece of this is new, right? The fact that he did not want to touch this. He's now somehow been dispatched to convince our Gulf allies that everything is going to be okay. Your sense of whether or not he has the credibility to do that with those allies and the questions that await him.
I don't think he has the credibility to do that. I mean, the president is like, oh, it's okay, Iran can keep these ballistic missiles, which it can fire at all of our Persian Gulf allies. So I think the facts of the deal send Rubio on a mission impossible, and Vance is also sent on a mission impossible. And so I talked to former Trump administration officials, and they just said this is very different from the first term. There were adults that were fighting back against the president. There was a more, sort of thorough policy process going on. And this war, there wasn't. In the second term, the president's more confident. He thinks he can make these foreign policy decisions. There's no sort of regular national security or even a large national security staff where experts can warn about what can go wrong. And so the president is driving all this stuff himself. And I'm proud that I got the line where a former administration official said, the president is asking J.D. Vance to somehow put lipstick on a very ugly pig. That's our headline on the story. And I just want to be fair, it's the president's fault that this deal is such a mess. The war arguably was a mess because he's so erratic, and now he's endangering maybe the two best hopes of the Republican Party in 2028.
It's also, though, telling to me, Charlie Sykes, that America's top diplomat was not tasked with putting lipstick on that pig. And I understand that Marco Rubio may be neither a makeup artist nor a livestock expert, but he is supposed to be the one who leads America's diplomacy. The fact that he didn't want to touch this with a 10-foot pole tells you everything you need to know about this deal.
Oh, I think it's a tremendous tell, no question about it, when you have the Secretary of State basically going back into the tall grass. Look, Donald Trump loves chaos, right? He loves pitting people against one another. He likes the rivalry. But the point has been made. All of this flows from Donald Trump, and it's an ill-conceived war now followed by a extremely ill-conceived peace non-deal. And it's hard to see how it comes out particularly well. Look, I mean, Donald Trump knows that Donald Trump wants out of this war. The public wants out of this war. The markets want out of this war. And Donald Trump is prepared to pay any price, literally any price. And he's basically handed the poison chalice to J.D. Vance and say, yeah, make this look like something other than a complete, foobar within a snafu, within a surrender. And I'm not sure that J.D. Vance has the diplomatic or the political skill to pull that off, and probably Trump knows that.
Can we, team, pull up the numbers that were released from the conservative-leaning AEI think tank? They've been keeping a running tab on the cost of this war. They said the average household has spent at least $555 more, up to $1,300 more in some households due to fuel and fertilizer price hikes. And the White House knows that. Ali, right? They know that this is deeply unpopular with the American people. And that may be, in part, I'm obsessed with this, why the president keeps bringing up Herbert Hoover. Just take a listen to the most recent example.
If the war with Iran could cause a worldwide depression, as you noted, Mr. President, are you willing to risk economic catastrophe and strike Iran again?
Well, not the way I'm doing it. It's not going to cause depression. I said it could cause a depression. Right, and they said that I don't want to be Herbert Hoover. That's a president I don't want to be, because he was in charge during the Great Depression, and certainly a lot of bad things could happen. That would be one of the things.
Nobody was bringing up Hoover before, and now here we are, right? I mean, look, the economic concerns have always been linked to what was happening in Iran because of the Strait of Hormuz. I think Americans quickly understood my prices at the pump are higher because there is something going on in Iran. The administration never really sold this action, but for Republicans on Capitol Hill who were behind the administration taking an aggressive stance with Iran, it was well received initially, and now the goodwill that they had from some of the hawks in the party on the Hill has been squandered by the deal that they've ultimately brokered. There's still some room here for them to negotiate, thank goodness, because they haven't contended with a lot of the key questions when you talk about Iran policy, everything from their nuclear program, their ballistic missile program, even their support of proxy groups. But even on the nuclear question, I think there is a way for the administration to get some of their naysayers on the Republican side on Capitol Hill back on their side, but it completely depends what the deal is. And I think you've done a great job with our colleagues, Jake and others, reporting on the ways that the Iranians have been able to really take a lot of what they wanted out of these negotiations. And so it ends up that the administration has really pleased nobody. They've put Republicans in a tough posture for a midterms that were already going to be difficult on affordability and other issues, making that even a bigger issue. They've also then made it so that Republican talking points for the last 10 years on Iran, skewering the Obama deal that Trump pulled us out of in his first term, is now exactly where they have to land. And if they want to support this administration, they've basically got to do a 180 on the talking points that they've had for a decade. And so it really does, the administration, put them in a tough place where they've pleased no one. And then there are open questions about if this Iran incursion war was worth what it was for the last few months.
I just want to play this out, David Rohde, if this had gone a different way and Vance had not been the one who was tasked with selling this and Rubio had been. I think, one, it is hard to sell something you do not believe in. I am not sold on the idea that if Rubio was selling this to Senator Graham, that the outcome would be fundamentally different.
No, it wouldn't be different, but you'd at least be protecting your vice president. And what former officials said to me is Trump doesn't help his subordinates. He doesn't aid their efforts. And look, Donald Trump needs to be president. There's another former president many don't want to be compared to, and maybe it's unfair, but Jimmy Carter. Iran has made a specialty of humiliating American presidents. They're going to drag this out as long as they can, because the weaker Trump looks, the more powerful Iran looks in the region. And so we don't know. I don't think there'll be a deal within 60 days. I think they're going to drag this out, and they'll shut the strait now off and on again, and that'll just drive Trump crazy.
Charlie, I want to highlight a scene from day 17 of this war. Maggie Haberman, Jonathan Swan, they have this detail of an Oval Office interaction in their new book, Regime Change. On the Resolute desk, instead of a map of the Middle East, were printouts of maple trees. I'm ordering trees for the White House, Trump told us. I know how to buy good trees, maples. Trump held another printout. The headline screamed 339 billion all-time views of Trump TikToks. Can you believe it? The president asked us. Charlie, can you believe it? I mean, the entire argument that Trump tried to make about the Biden years was that they did not have their eye on the prize, that they were not focused on the things that American cared most about. And right now you have a president who's dealing in Kinko printouts and maple trees.
Very much on brand, though. I mean, the president laser focused on everything except the war, whether it's ballrooms or reflecting ponds or building arches or putting his name on the Kennedy Center or having a UFC match on the South Lawn of the White House. This has been one of the most extraordinary things about the last 6 months has been the kind of, I'm searching for the word. Is it delusional? A president who seems tone deaf to what, is happening, in the nation and in the world. But this does seem to be very, very consistent with what we have seen from the president, that here you have a president who has taken the nation to war on a whim without a plan. And what is he obsessed about? Buying maple trees. It's a hell of a revealing anecdote.
I want to, David, you have Trump this morning posting that Iran has agreed to high-level nuclear inspections long into the future, writing infinity with 3 exclamation points. Iran said no inspections are scheduled. Trump also says Iran's new funds will be used to buy American crops. Iran says they're using the money however they want. I mean, I know that Vice President Vance keeps saying they're like tricky negotiators, but they're not at all on the same page.
No, they're not. And Look, President Trump takes risks. He does a lot of interviews. I'm trying to name some good things about him, but I've never seen a president carry out complicated foreign policy negotiations like this. And this is a war. 13 Americans died.
Yes.
50,000 service members are still in this region, and it could be a global energy crisis. And so it's incredible that he keeps making these outlandish claims. Jake talked about the very first day of the talks, he makes a threat to the Iranians that I think Vance didn't even know was coming, and the Iranians threatened to walk out. He's doing the same thing today. And maybe it works in American politics and, winning the Republican nomination and winning the 2024 election, but it's not working when it comes to waging war or making peace.